Okay, you're good.
All right, so today we decided to do our project on why college athletes transfer more than ever and what it means for sports. So I'm just going to start out with a number really quick. In 2023, over 26,000 college athletes entered the transfer portal. That's more players than an entire college conferences combined in a single year, and it's only gone up since 2023. Michigan's national championship team, their whole starting offense was built from transfers. The team that won it all assembled players who left somewhere else the year before. That's not an accident. That's a new normal. Tonight, we're going to break down exactly what's happening, how big it's gotten, and what it actually is doing to college sports as we know. I'm covering the causes, how we got there. Thomas is going to present to you the data and players, and then Jeremy's going to get into what it all means, the impact and the future of it all. So let's get into it. So the transfer portal explained. Before anything else, you need to understand what the transfer portal actually is because most people hear the term and just think it means a player switching schools. It's way more than that. At its core, the portal is a database ran by the NCAA. When an athlete decides they want to leave, they submit their name. The second that happens, every college program in the country can see it, and any school can start recruiting that player with zero restrictions. So before 2018, transferring came with a punishment. You had to sit out an entire year, 12 months of not playing. So even if you were miserable or buried on the depth chart, no shot at playing time, most people stayed. They literally didn't really have a choice. In 2018, the NCAA launched the official portal system, but the sit out rule was still there. So it wasn't a free for all yet, more just a cleaner way to track transfers. So it wasn't nothing really crazy. The real turning point was 2021. The NCAA killed the sit out rule completely. Now you can transfer anywhere and play immediately. No penalty, no waiting, no lost year. You just go straight into it. That one change is why the portal entries went from a few thousand to over 26,000 almost overnight. Here's something that most people don't know. The moment a player enters the portal, their school loses that scholarship immediately. Gone. They can give it to someone else right then. So just entering is a real commitment, and players have about 45 days to find new schools before they risk losing eligibility. Once you're in, you're on the clock. Not everyone who enters actually leaves. Some players use it as leverage. They put their name in, other schools call, and suddenly the coach is offering them more playing time or more money to stay. Then they pull their name out. The portal became a negotiating tool just as much as an exit. So the NCAA built a system where college athletes have real leverage for the first time ever. They could leave, stay, and negotiate, or just shop around. And that changes everything about how college sports operate. Good for the next slide. So this is NIL money and money as a driving force. At the exact same time, all the portal rules were changing. Something else happened that made everything way bigger. Athletes got the right to make money. In July 2021, same year as the rule changed, not a coincidence, the NCAA introduced NIL, which is your name, image, and likeness. For the first time ever, a college athlete could sign a sponsorship, post a paid ad, do a commercial, actually profit for being them. Bigger school, bigger city, bigger fan base, that athlete earns more money, way more money. So if you're a starter at a mid-level program and a powerhouse is offering you serious NIL money to transfer, why would you stay? That calculation is happening thousands of times a year. For example, Carson Beck was the starting quarterback at Georgia, one of the best in the country, and he entered the portal and ends up at Miami for reportedly around $3 to $4 million in NIL money. He helps take Miami to the national championship. That's why buying a quarterback, that's what buying a quarterback looks like now. And Miami didn't stop there. This year, they poached Darian Mensah from Duke, their starting quarterback, for a reported $7 to $10 million. A college quarterback, not a pro, which is $7 to $10 million. That number tells you everything about where this is headed. Schools set up what are called collectives, booster groups that pool donor money specifically to offer NIL deals with transfer. It's opening bidding wars for players, and the school with the deepest pockets win every time. So NIL is supposed to just let athletes make some money off their name. What it actually did was turn college sports into an open market, and the portal is how players move through it. All good for the next slide. So the athletic and personal motives, not every transfer is about chasing millions, because if you ask athletes themselves why they transferred, the number one answer isn't NIL. It's way simpler. It's actually playing time. That's it. You work your whole life to play college sports. You get there, and then you're third on the depth chart with no real shot. Before the portal, you were stuck. Now you can just go somewhere. You can actually play. That's not selfish. That's an athlete trying to compete. Look at Coach Prime at Colorado, comes in as the new head coach and basically hits the reset button. And he brought in over 50 transfers his first year. Not five, not 10, but over 50. He didn't rebuild the team, he replaced it entirely. That's a GM move, not a coaching move. You also have Matt Campbell. He left Iowa State for Penn State this year and brought 23 Iowa State players with him. 23 guys just picked up and moved programs because their coach did. That used to be unthinkable. Now it's just another Tuesday in college sports. What that tells you is loyalty is shifted. It's not really to the school anymore. It's to the coach. The second that coach leaves, players start making their own decisions, and the portal makes it easier to act on it. And beyond all that, being closer to home, better academic program, different campus. After COVID, especially, athletes became way more open about their mental health. If a program has a toxic culture or a bad situation, the portal gave athletes an exit door that flat out didn't exist before. That part is hard to argue against. And then we're all good to go to the next one. So, college sports, free agency problem. So, when you put all of that together, the portal, NIL money in the millions, collectives writing checks, coaches bringing 20 plus players when they bolt, what does that start to look like? It's exactly like professional free agency. In the NFL, every offseason, players hit the open market, agents negotiate, teams compete with money, rosters get rebuilt. College football does the exact same thing now. Portal windows every year, open bidding wars, coaches talking about roster management like they're running an NFL franchise. The difference between college and pro sports used to be clear: loyalty, playing for the school, becoming a pro. Now you've got college QBs on $7 million deals. National champions built entirely from transfers. The line is gone, or at least it's disappearing fast. That's why this topic matters. It's not just about players switching schools. It's about what college sports actually is anymore and whether the version of it we grew up watching even exists in 10 years. Those are the causes. Now, the question is just how big has it gotten? The numbers are wild. Thomas is going to show you exactly what the data looks like. And then you're all going to switch.
So here we have the transfer portal by the numbers. I mean, this slide itself really shows how much the transfer portal has grown. So you look back to 2018 when the NCAA first introduced the portal, and there was only about 3,900 athletes entering. But come 2024, and that number jumps to over 28,000. That's a 630% increase, which is honestly insane when you think about it. Myself, as an athlete here at FGCU, I was one of those transfers. I came here from an NAIA school, and for many reasons, like Devin has mentioned, it was about playing time. It was about following the coach, but it was also just about becoming or going to a school with a better environment. And that's a lot of the reasons behind why people transfer. Players expect to have the option to leave, and coaches expect to lose and gain players every year. But this is what tells us why transferring is no longer something that's rare, and it's actually a normal part of college sports. Because of this, roster building has completely changed as well. And coaches are no longer just recruiting high school players and developing over time. They're constantly looking to rebuild their team every off season using the portal. And instead of long-term development, we're starting to see short-term team building, whether it be looking for a national championship, such as Michigan did this year with a starting lineup of 5 transfers, or whether it be trying to find impact players quickly. The transfer portal is taking over. And this is why people compare college sports today to professional sports, because it's starting to look very similar. Now, looking at which sports are most effective, for me, and looking at the data, we see football and men's basketball clearly stand out at 88% and 76%. This means that almost every team in those sports is dealing with transfers every single year. And the reason for this is simple. These sports generate the most money and have the biggest NIL opportunities. So players have more incentive to move. And another important thing is the roster size. In basketball, the teams are obviously a lot smaller than in a football. So even just a few transfers can completely change a team. That's why basketball is one of the most impacted sports. If you have one or two players, that can completely change the season. And we're also seeing women's basketball grow in this area as NIL becomes more and more popular. So overall, I think the money and exposure the sport has is why we're seeing more and more transfers happening. Now, for me, this is the most important slide because it really shows how different transferring outcomes can be. Here we have a couple of high profile transfer case studies, um, which I found out about, and it's really fascinating to see the different stories that people have taken. For example, we have the success story. Joe Burrow started at Ohio State, where he barely played. He then transferred to LSU after that and became a starter, won the national championship, won the Heisman Trophy, and became the number one pick in the NFL draft. That's basically the best case scenario. You go from the school that you weren't treated respectfully at and that you had no success at, and then you come to another school and you come out with all the success. Now we have the risky transfer. Cade McNamara transferred from Michigan to Iowa because he was looking for a bigger opportunity, but things didn't go as planned. There was injuries and the system fit made it a tough situation and he didn't have the same success, which shows that transferring can be a real risk and it doesn't always work out. And then we have the coaching change example. Similar to what Devin mentioned earlier, we have Spencer Rattler, who was a transfer from Oklahoma to South Carolina when Shane Beamer was the head coach. Beamer had connections to Oklahoma, so Rattler followed a coach and the system he trusted, which happens a lot. It's happened in the golfing world as well, where Jake Amos left East Tennessee State and went to LSU. He took numerous golfers with him, I think 3 or 4 to be exact, and then ended up taking LSU from outside of the top 50 rank to inside of the top 5. This connects to a bigger trend in college sports as teams are now being built through transfers instead of development. As we mentioned previously, the Michigan Wolverines men's basketball team was heavily used transfers to rebuild their rosters quickly. Overall, this slide shows that the transfer portal creates opportunity, but there's also a lot of risk and uncertainty with what goes on. So who actually benefits from all of this? We talk about the transfer portal, the winners and the losers, but how do we really see who benefits and who doesn't? The biggest winners are the power programs, schools like Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, the schools that have more money, the schools that have bigger fan bases and a stronger NIL collective so they can attract top transfers every single year. I remember a quote from Nick Saban that he said on the Pat McAfee show, where he said, if you're not paying the right guys, you're going to be out of luck. And I think that's becoming more and more the case. Another group of winners are the athletes who find a better fit. For some players, they just need more playing time or a better system, and the portal allows them to find that. For me, I felt like a big fish in a small pond at my old school. We were in a lower division, and for me, it was a case of I felt like I reached the potential as much as I could get. So then transferring to a Division 1 school, all of a sudden you become a small fish in a big pond, but you're with so many other athletes that want to be successful and want to develop their careers more than just within college. So for me, it was great to be in that environment and progress as much as I could. There are also some clear losers, though. You look at some mid-major schools which are losing players to the bigger programs. Like I mentioned earlier, East Tennessee State losing 3 or 4 of their best players to LSU. Their ranking dramatically fell by 112 spots just in 1 year. So instead of building strong teams, it's important that they develop the players who eventually leave. Also, walk-ons and younger players are being pushed out because coaches prefer experienced transfers. So what we're seeing is a growing gap between big problems and smaller ones. Basically, the rich schools are getting richer and the small schools are struggling to keep up. And that's a problem that's going to not be sustainable for the smaller schools. So here's the athlete's perspective. This slide shows why athletes actually decide to transfer. The number one reason is playing time, like Devin mentioned. Around 38% of athletes transfer because they want more opportunities to play. I think this is the case within bigger schools, especially in sports with more members on the team, such as soccer or football, where players feel like they're falling down the depth chart. Maybe they're just playing in the practice squads, or they're not getting the playing time that they either feel they deserve or feel that they should be earned through working hard in training. After that comes NIL opportunities, coaching changes, and personal reasons. NIL is taking over the college world, and money is being thrown left, right, and center at athletes through endorsements and sponsorships to either promote the school, promote their own personal brand, or in NIL terms, promote their name, image, and likeness. And even though money is important, it's not just the main reason. Most players just want to be on the field or the court. Another important point is that most athletes report being happier after transferring. As I speak for myself, this was exactly the case. Going from a small school in the middle of Tennessee with cold winters to coming down to Florida and being able to play golf all year round, it was really a dream come true when I could do that. And this also plays a big part in how the portal is giving players more control over their careers. For me, I felt like I was limited in my progression, having not being able to play golf for 3 months of the year due to snow and cold weather, to then coming to Florida and being able to play golf all year round. It really allowed me to access the next level in my career. And this also has a massive impact on mental health. Athletes now feel more comfortable leaving situations that aren't good for them, whether it's a bad fit, too much pressure, or a toxic environment. I remember having conversations with some of my old teammates who also wanted to transfer, but we felt like as a team we had a really good morale. Even though the standard and the quality of everything wasn't quite like a D1 level, the morale in the team, we had a great connection. And I think when you transfer, that's a massive factor that can play on the mind of the athlete. And I think for the athlete's perspective, the transfer portal is empowering. It gives you opportunity to progress, develop, and move on to bigger and better things, or it gets you the ability to play more, even if it means downgrading in schools. It creates more competition and uncertainty because nothing is guaranteed anymore. And I think that's the biggest thing that the transfer portal has shown us.
All right, so now I'm going to shift into the impact that the transfer portal is having on college sports, starting with team chemistry and overall culture. One of the biggest things we're seeing is roster instability. Teams are changing more year to year than they ever have before. In the past, you could expect a core group of players to develop together over 3 or 4 years. Now that's not really the case. The starting lineup can look completely different every single season, which makes it harder to build long-term chemistry. Another major impact is on coaches. They're dealing with basically year-round recruiting now. Instead of focusing on high school players, they also have to constantly monitor the transfer portal. So instead of having an off season, it's almost like recruiting cycles back to back, which can lead them to burnout. From the fan side, there's also a disconnect starting to happen. Fans used to build strong connections with players who stayed at a school for years. Now players might only be there for one season, so it's harder to build that same loyalty. And then inside the locker room, you're mixing players who've been there for years with new transfers coming in, expecting bigger roles right away. That creates tension with leadership, playing time, and team identity. So overall, while the portal gives players more freedom, it definitely changes the dynamic of how teams function. Moving on from team culture, the transfer portal is also having a big impact on fans, media, and revenue. Starting with fans, engagement is going kind of both ways. On one hand, shorter player tenures can hurt long-term fan connections. If a player leaves after 1 year, fans don't really get attached the same way they used to. That can affect things like jersey sales and overall loyalty. But at the same time, all the transfer news actually creates a lot of attention. It's almost like free agency in pro sports, where fans constantly checking updates, rumors, and signings. That leads into media. Networks can now cover the transfer portal almost like a trade deadline. There's constant coverage, breaking news, and analysis, which drives a lot of views and ad revenue. So even though it might hurt the structure of college sports a little, it's actually creating more content and engagement from a media standpoint. Then financially, schools are spending more than ever to stay competitive. NIL collectives are putting together deals to attract transfers, and that cost is rising quickly. So while revenue is increasing in some areas, expenses are also going up. especially for schools trying to keep up with top programs. Overall, it's creating a system where money and exposure play a much bigger role than they used to. This brings up some important concerns about equity and fairness in college sports. First, this isn't just affecting football anymore. Women's sports are also seeing a big increase in transfer activity, like we talked about before, which shows how widespread this has become. Another issue is that smaller schools or mid-major programs are losing their best players to bigger schools with more money and better exposure. So instead of developing talent and keeping it, they're almost acting like a pipeline to larger programs. There's also the issue of scholarship limits. Bigger programs have more resources and more flexibility, which allows them to bring in more transfers and replace players more easily. That puts smaller programs at a disadvantage. Another group that's being impacted is walk-ons and developmental players. With so many transfers coming in, there are fewer opportunities for those players to grow within a program over time. And not every athlete benefits equally. Players in non-revenue sports don't have the same NIL opportunities, so they don't get the same advantages from transferring. So while the transfer portal was designed to give athletes more freedom, the reality is that benefits some athletes a lot more than others. That's why there's still an open question about whether the system is truly fair or not. So because of all these impacts, there are already efforts being made to try and regulate the system. The NCAA is currently discussing changes like limiting transfer windows, reducing the number of entries, and adding restrictions on how often athletes can enter the portal. There's also a major legal development with the House versus NCAA case, which could allow schools to directly share revenue with athletes. If that happens, it might just reduce the need for athletes to transfer for NIL opportunities, since they could earn money directly from their school. On top of that, some conferences are starting to create their own rules around roster limits and transfer policies. And even at the federal level, lawmakers have started discussing the possibility of creating national NIL framework to standardize everything. So right now, the system is still evolving, and there's still a lot of uncertainty about what it will look like in the future. To wrap everything up, the transfer portal has completely changed college sports in a short amount of time. Looking back at everything we covered, the combination of the portal, NIL, and rule changes has created what's basically a perfect storm of player movement. The data shows just how big that change is, with over 28,000 transfers in 2024 alone. And the impact goes beyond just players. It's affecting team culture, fairness, revenue, and the overall structure of college sports. So the big question moving forward is whether this is actually making college sports better, or if it's just making it more similar to professional sports. There are definitely benefits, especially in terms of player freedom and opportunity, but there are also challenges that still need to be figured out. So overall, it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just a major shift that's still playing out in real time. All right.
Well done.
Yeah.